He's a retired L.A. Sheriff's Department homicide detective. He was assigned as a supervisor to a special enforcement team. Two of his officers, Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, were shot and killed in the line of duty. He's here to tell the story. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, their realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio chat app. By the way, download the app today. It is free. And also join us in Breakfast with Champions, also free. I'm there almost every day of the week, every weekday morning. It's a great place to educate yourself, get some motivation, inspiration, and make friends from all over the planet. That's the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse drop-in social audio app. Get it today. It is free. Both are free. Get more details online at thebwcinfo.com. Calling us from the state of California, we have Fred Reynolds on the phone. Fred is a retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's homicide detective. He's also author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. And Fred, first of all, thank you for your service. And secondly, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Show. Very much appreciated.
I'm honored to be here.
It's good to have you here. We're talking about something. Most of our conversations are tough. Most of the people that come in as guests on the Law Enforcement Today show don't have happily ever after, heartwarming, uplifting stories to tell. Yours is one of those. You're retired law enforcement, and I got to tell you, my biggest fear in law enforcement, well, the two of them, was me shooting someone, an innocent person or another police officer, and the other one was having officers that worked under me killed in the line of duty. And you, unfortunately, had to go through that with the deaths of Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, correct?
Yes.
Brother, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you dealt with it. I went through a death of when I was a sergeant, a young officer named William Martin worked for me, and I transferred to another district, and a couple months later, he was shot and killed in the line of duty. And I'll be honest with you, Fred, I still have problems with that. I don't have guilt anymore over it. Took a long time to disarm that, but I still have really negative, I'd say tough emotions over it.
Yeah, so do I. I didn't have any idea just how deep the level of emotion or responsibility that I took upon myself. For a long time, I blamed myself for the death of these officers. On the night that they were killed, it was February 22nd, 1993. And I worked in the city of Compton at that time. I was a Compton police officer from 1985 until 2000. Then the Sheriff's Department came in and assumed responsibility for policing the city of Compton, and I went and I became a deputy sheriff. But when the officers were murdered in 93, I was a field training officer for the Compton Police Department. And the city had been dealing with a rash of shootings and murders. It was unbelievable. We were having at least 2 or 3 gunshot victims every night, and probably 2 murders, once a week. It was unbelievable the amount of violence that we were dealing with. So as a result, the watch commander on the shift that night, he put together, a team. He called them a strike force, just to go out and target, gang areas and try to keep the gang-related shootings down. So we didn't answer any radio calls. We just rolled around to all the hot spots and we dealt with gangsters, shoot them away, tried to arrest them if we caught them doing something illegal. And we did that all night. And I was dating a girl. I thought I was in love with her, and I wanted to get off early and go see her. So when everything kind of quieted down, we were supposed to get off at 1:30, but around 11 o'clock, I went in and I asked the watch commander if I can get off early, right? My whole purpose was to go see this girl. Well, while I'm about to get dressed to leave work, over the station intercom system, the dispatcher broadcasted that we had an officer down at Rosecrans and Dwight. And I had been a cop at that time. By that time, I had been a cop for about 7 years. And I had never heard an officer down call, but I know every cop knows officer down. It makes the hair on your neck rise. It makes the skin crawl because it's not anything good. So I slammed my locker shut and I ran up the stairs and to get my trainee. I was training a guy at the time by the name of Ivan Swanson, and I told him, "Let's go." So we jumped in our car, and as soon as we were pulling off the back lot, the dispatcher updated the call to 2 officers down. Now, 1 officer down is bad enough, but when they say 2 officers down, something really bad happened. So we rolled, lights, emergency lights and sirens on. We get to the scene, and I see these 2 officers, and they're both dead in the street. One has a gunshot wound to his face. Officer MacDonald. I still get emotional when I tell the story because just like you were telling me about the officer that died on your watch, it's something that you carry with you, right? There's hardly a day that goes by when I don't think of my friends being killed. And Compton PD was a very small department. It was about 125. So we knew each other intimately, all of us. And Officer Burrell was one of my best friends. I watched him grow up from a kid, 15 years old. He's a community service officer, an explorer, a jailer, and then he became a cop. So I watched this kid as he went through the law enforcement process all the way up to, where he always wanted to be a police officer, and I watched him reach that goal. And, when I saw them lying in the street dead, a range of emotions came over me rather, and, I was kind of shocked for a minute. I considered myself a good street cop, hardened, someone that could deal with anything that came at me, but that I was not prepared for.
I don't think there's anything that prepares you for that. Look, it sounds like your career was a lot like mine. A lot of violence, a lot of homicides, a lot of shootings, and you do get kind of hardened to it. And you become you use the term I love, street cop. And I consider myself to be a street cop of a compliment when I give that to someone. So 7 years on the job, you've seen pretty much everything. In an agency like Compton, Baltimore, you've been been through it many times. Yes.
And, it was just surreal to me that my friends were lying in the street dead, right? And Kevin, he sustained horrific wounds. He was shot in the face and the head. And so, after I kind of got composed myself, I started giving orders what to do, block off intersections, put up the crime scene tape, let's get everybody rolling. And then, I went over, there was a little bridge that ran over a creek next to where they were murdered. And once all the, the world rolls when the cop is shot. So, there were sirens everywhere, cop cars everywhere. I looked up and all of a sudden there was like cops everywhere. And I didn't even see them arriving, most of them. But I was on this bridge and I was trying to compose myself. And the watch commander that night came over and he touched me on the shoulder. He said, "Hey man, I need you to handle this," right? Because I was one of the most senior officers on, and I was considered one of the better writers on the department. I had a really good eye for detail. So they made me handle the case. So not only did I have to see my friends dead in the street, I also had to conduct the initial investigation. And if you're from a large agency, that would never happen.
No.
They would take someone out and they would bring someone that doesn't have an emotional attachment to the victim to handle it. But we didn't. We weren't afforded that luxury.
Well, that's one of the drawbacks of having a smaller agency. And I got to confess, when I was young patrolman in Baltimore, I thought, the county guys, the sheriff's departments, they had it easy. I didn't realize at the time there's a whole lot less of them. They had to do everything. Backup was a lot further away. And when you come from a small agency, you said a critical point is that you don't have the luxury of relying on someone else to come in. We are talking with Fred Reynolds. Fred is a retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department homicide detective. He's also author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. He's talking about the murder of police officers Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald in the Compton, California Police Department. We're going to take a short break. This is the Law Enforcement Show. I promise you, we'll be right back.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Return to conversation with Fred Reynolds. Fred is calling us from California. He is a retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department homicide detective, also author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. In 1993, he is with the Compton Police Department, which was disbanded and absorbed by the LA County Sheriff's Department. He was a field training officer, and he's talking about the incident where two of his coworkers, police officers Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, were shot and killed. And when we left for break, you rolled up on a scene. You were an FTO. You're kind of senior guy. You were a great report writer, and your watch commander said, I need you to take over this. I need you to be the primary investigating officer. First of all, I don't know about you. I can only assume, and I hate to assume, to say about that. When really bad things happen to me, part of my first response, Fred, was, I can't believe this is happening to me. I can't believe this is going on. And I wonder if there was like a surreal element when you get there and you see your friends down the street, they're both dead. You're like, I can't believe this is going on.
Yes. It was like an out of body experience. Like you said, the perfect word describes it. It was surreal. Because I had seen so many gunshot victims, so many murdered people during my tenure working in the city of Compton. It almost became like and I hate to be callous, but it almost came to be where we just, performed it like robots. We get there, we locate witnesses, we rope off the scene, we mark evidence, and we wait for detectives to arrive, and then we sit in our cars and we eat a donut and we drink coffee. That was the way patrol officers normally handled gunshot victim and murder victim calls.
And part of that, by the way, is, I think, to protect ourselves, because you see so much of it. And I would love to tell you right now, Fred, that every death and every person that the last thing they saw was me or another Baltimore police officer, that those things didn't take a toll on me. They did. I did my best to protect myself, develop the hard exterior, the gallows humor, all that stuff you talked about, but it didn't succeed. In the long run, it kind of crippled me.
Yeah, because we internalize it, because, law enforcement, much like, the military, we have to be seen as those people that you can count on, those people that aren't rattled by certain things. Because we've always been taught that if we display emotion, it's a show of weakness, right? So we internalize it, and we definitely don't want to be seen as weak amongst our peers, right? But it took me years to find out that we all feel the same trauma, and we all internalize it in different ways. Now, after I processed that scene, I had to catalog the bloody equipment from my friends, their badges. They had blood stains on them. And, I'm in the report writing room, and I'm doing this, and it was almost like it wasn't me really doing it. It was almost like, someone else had entered my body and started doing that, processing the evidence and writing the report. And the woman that I wanted to get off early to go see, when I was finally done with my duties regarding that investigation, I went to her apartment, and, she had another guy there, right? So, now I realize that, okay, I wanted to get off early to see this woman, and she's seeing someone else. And if I hadn't have wanted to get off early to see her, maybe I could have been there when my friends encountered this, criminal, this murderer, and maybe everything would have turned out different, right? So I blamed myself because I was in charge of that unit that the watch commander put together. And for a long time, I felt like I let my team down because, I wanted to get off early to go see a woman, and, my friends were murdered.
I'll be honest, I think that is pretty natural, Fred, because I retired to the rank of sergeant, and ultimately it was my responsibility to make sure the guys, when I say guys, that means men and women that work for me, were safe, and that they did their job to the best of their ability, that the people got the best service possible. So you kind of really had and buffer them from lieutenants and above. So that guilt, I don't know of a way not to have it, because I'm not saying you were responsible, but part of us, we feel like a deep level of responsibility. This guy was committed to killing them. There was no doubt about it.
Yes, he was a bad man, real bad man. One of the most ruthless gang members from one of the most ruthless gangs in L.A. County. And, Burrell and MacDonald, they came across him. And like I said, I blame myself because, I feel like those are my guys. And, I'm responsible for making sure that they get home safe to their families. And I felt like I had let them down. I felt like that for a long time. And when I finally got home after, realizing that, I tried to get off early to see this woman who obviously wasn't into me as much as I was into her. And because of this, to me, I felt like I let my friends down and they died as a result of my lust.
And part of me,
be perfectly candid with you.
Fred, I get it. Look, when I was 22, 23, 24, even into my early 30s, I was a totally different guy than I am today. And my priorities are totally different. The coulda, shoulda, wouldas. I'm not God. I'm not Superman. I'm a good street cop, and I do the best I could. And sometimes the best I can do is not good enough. It doesn't. You and I both know this. Everyone doesn't survive, no matter how hard we try.
Right.
And sometimes it's got to be good enough. I'll be honest with you, Fred. No one can convince me that when I'm going through it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Nobody can tell. I mean, people will tell you, oh, man, it wasn't your fault. There was nothing you could do. It was going to happen anyway. Yeah, that's just lip service when you're carrying in this guilt inside of you, And when I got home that next day, I went to the store and I bought a bottle of booze and I drank until I passed out. Now I had blood, still had blood on my hands, from handling their uniforms and their badge, and I'm looking at my hands, I got blood on my hands, I'm drinking, I just pass out, and I went through that for 3, 4, 5 days, just, whenever one bottle was empty, I'd go get another one. And I also went through a period where I felt like I didn't even want to be a cop anymore. It was really, really a struggle for me. I didn't talk to anyone. I should have.
Well, that was a different era. We didn't talk about stuff back then.
Yeah, because it was looked down upon by your peers. It's like, oh, where you go? You want to talk to a psych? What's wrong?
The other thing is, we're supposed to be the ones that have the answers for people. We're supposed to solve their problems. And I still to this day have a hard time letting anybody help me. I have a difficult time even telling people to help me. And you said earlier something very important. Showing emotions was a sign of weakness. And right away we assume the emotions of sadness and all that stuff. That also incorporates things like anger, someone who loses it all the time on calls. You don't want that guy around. If you have to cuff someone and take them into custody, you don't want some hothead coming in, inflaming a situation and making it worse. So it's not just sadness, it's all emotion. You had to really be measured all the time.
Yes. Yeah, and you're exactly right. And I'm sure like most cops, there's always one knucklehead that goes in, the guys are.
There were times it was me. I'll be honest with you. There were times I lost it. And that's one of the things about the squad concept that we can talk about later if we have time. When someone's having a bad day, a bad moment, the squad takes over, pulls them aside, puts them in the car, says, we got it from here. You take it easy. We'll handle it. And sometimes those roles reverse. But the whole emotion is a sign of weakness. When we return to our conversation with Fred Reynolds, we're going to talk more about the impact of the murders of police officers Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald on him and his career. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We're going to take a short break. I promise you. We'll be right back. Do you want to be a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast? It's really quite simple. And before you get into this notion that I'm not a cop, I wasn't a cop, I don't have something to contribute. Well, the show is about investigating crime. That's one aspect of it from the real life perspective of those who did it. And then it's also about Trauma. How trauma impacted them. Often crime-based, but not always. Our guests quite often are law enforcement officers, other first responders, military, victims of crime, their spouses, or survivors, talking about how trauma impacted them, what happened, how it affected their lives, and how they rebuilt their lives after. If you want to be a guest, just contact me. It's really simple. Send an email to jay@letradio.com. That's jay@letradio.com. Or go to letradio.com and the Contact Us page, and you can get me right there as well. Back to our conversation with Fred Reynolds, calling us from California. Fred is a retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department homicide detective, author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. Early in his career, he was a member of the Compton, California Police Department, which was disbanded and absorbed by the LA County Sheriff's Department. And in February 22nd, 1993, two of his co-workers, his officers, Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, were shot and killed in the line of duty, and he was the primary investigating officer on scene. Before we went to break, Kevin, you're talking about something a lot of us do. When really, really bad things happen, a lot of times we deal with it by not being able to sleep, so we drink ourselves to sleep. We drink ourselves into passing out every night, and we isolate it. We don't talk to anybody because a range of emotions. And some could say we don't trust ourselves. That's why we do that. I'm not that much of a deep thinker. I just know it's something I did. And for many of us, when we do that, it works for a while, and then it can be counterproductive. You were drinking yourself into passing out every night for nights in a row.
Yes. Yes, I was. And I was younger then, and I could recover quicker. So I would drink late into the night, come home 2, 3 in the morning after choir practice with the guys and girls, because we have females that were just like us, female cops, and I'd come home, get a couple hours of sleep, wake up, and go right back to work and be productive. But it was being productive for the moment, but like you said, it was counterproductive in the grand scheme of things. I was always a very good street cop. I was one of the most productive, so I was good professionally for the most part. But in my personal life, it was coming apart, and I was having a hard time trying to determine whether I wanted to remain a police officer. But it was bad, man. It was really, really bad, and like I said, to this day. I think about it, and I carried the burden. I blame myself for what happened to them.
Well, you're not alone. And you're not alone to blame yourself. I still blame myself for Billy Martin. And I wasn't there. I was in a different district. There's nothing I could have done in reality. I know this. You know that. One of the things people don't seem to understand, when you have hardcore, violent career criminals, gang members, you said this guy was one of the worst of the worst. When they're in prison... When they're in prison, they practice coming off the wall, disarming, and shooting police. They practice it daily. When they come out, they are ready for this. And it's like their chosen profession, just like yours and I's with law enforcement. There's hazards that come along with that. But the reality is we didn't get to train every day. These guys do.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, a lot of times life gets in the way. We have families, we have kids, we got to take our kids to basketball games, pick them up from school. You come home, you're exhausted, you go to sleep, you wake up, you go right back to work. The meantime, your adversary, like you said, he's locked up and he's doing 100 push-ups, 4 times a day. He's doing 1,000 sit-ups, and he's practicing coming off the walls and disarming police officers. And these are the individuals that we have to deal with in order to try to make our communities just a little bit safer. A lot of people don't realize that, or maybe they just don't care. But in terms of tactics, a lot of times we're outgunned by the criminals, the ones that are committed to that life. They practice it, and like I said, we have lives. When Kevin and Jimmy were murdered, I was not too long divorced. I had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And, to be honest with you, I was drinking so much and the job was consuming me, and the guilt, I kind of neglected them for a period. It wasn't a situation where they lived with me. It was a situation where the mother had custody. and I got weekend visits, and 2 weeks out of every other month, and the quality of my visits with them while I was going through that, it wasn't good, And I thought that I was doing the right thing because, okay, I pick up my kids, I'm going to spend whatever money I want on them, I'm going to buy whatever they want, but I wasn't fulfilling the emotional need, the attachment to their father that a child needs, I thought that if I just showered them with gifts, it's okay. And then I'd come, I'd pour me a glass of booze and, let them play video games or watch videos. It wasn't good.
I swear you're telling my story. You really are. One of the things that happened for me, Kevin, is, we didn't come home and talk about what we went through during that day. And the reasons why is I didn't want my wife to worry any more than she did. She already had enough on her plate. And there was a lot that came with 2 newborn children, all that stuff. And very slowly, I began to isolate and withdraw because I was so angry all the time that I didn't want to respond. And I wound up drinking till I could pass out every night. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. But there came a point, Kevin, I'm going to ask you this, that I became deeply ashamed of who I was. None of the things I did, but who I'd become, because I never set out to be that guy. And I felt like I'd let my kids down. I let my wife at the time down. I let my mother, my father, my siblings all down, and I was living a life of someone who I didn't want to be.
And I was the exact same way. The only difference is, I was single. I was a divorcee, so I would go out, drink, pick up these women, strange women, have one night stands with them, and would never call them again, never see them again, And that's not a good thing, man. But that's the way that I wanted to be because I didn't want anyone close to me. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh,
because
I get you 100%.
Want anyone close to me to get hurt again. So I went through this. It wasn't good the way I treated women. I wasn't caring. I wasn't committed to a lot of these women. They were just things to do. And I understand that it's bad. I understand that was a horrible thing to do. But then I met this woman that was a dispatcher at the Compton Police Department. She was one of the new hires. And I took her out. And initially, my plan was to do the same thing with her that I had done to these other women, right? Just use them for, a need to get through to the next day. But it was something about her. And I started seeing her exclusively. And we ended up getting married, right? And she changed my whole life, my whole perspective of how I see things. And I wanted to be a better person. And, I'm not ashamed to say that it was a woman that, ultimately helped get me back on track, not only in my professional life, but more importantly in my personal life.
Look, I get the same thing. I became
a better person.
I was divorced, and I went through a stage where if a woman I was dating said, I thought you were going to call me Tuesday, and I didn't, and started an argument, I'd never talk to them again.
Right.
And that's the way I was. And part of it is there's a negative with that. And I'm not going to get all psychological here, but when all you do is one night stands, part of you feels like I'm not worthy of getting to know and having intimacy. It's a really catch-22. And I met my now wife, and when I met her, I was bound to determine never get serious with anyone ever, ever again. And next thing I know, I'm proposing a few months later.
Wow.
And she really changed my world.
I'm going to tell you, man, this book, I've read some of the reviews about it, and although the murders of my friends are one of the primary stories in the book, it's a lot about my personal life and my relationships. And what you just said describes a few parts of the book. It's kind of eerie talking to you because it seems like our careers kind of paralleled.
I think we're cut from the same cloth, and we're in totally different sides of the country. This is a law enforcement show. We're talking with Fred Reynolds. Fred is retired L.A. County Sheriff's Department homicide detective. He's also author of a book. It is called Black, White, and Gray All Over. This is a law enforcement show. When we return, we'll talk more about the murders of police officer Kevin Burrell, James MacDonald, and its impact on Fred. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Breakfast with Champions is the tool I use in the morning to get myself ready to face the world. There is so much negativity as you move about your day from traffic to politics. The conversations are motivating and inspiring, and I can face the world with a positive attitude. So join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join us soon. Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
One of the questions I get all the time is, how can I show my support for law enforcement? We're all busy. We've got busy lives, but there's something oh so simple you can do with our Facebook page. Search for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And when you see a post you agree with that resonates with you, share it, especially episodes of the podcast. To do all that, just search for us on Facebook, look for Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to click like. Back to our conversation with Fred Reynolds on the Law Enforcement Show. Fred is retired Los Angeles County Sheriff's homicide detective, author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. He was part of the Compton, California Police Department before it disbanded. And in February 22nd, 1993, two of his officers, Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, were gunned down, shot, and killed in the line of duty, and he was the primary investigating officer. Before we went to break, Fred, you started talking about this transition in life. You're going through the stage of, and I did it too, where you isolate, you shut down, you don't want to be around people, you don't want to let anyone get really close to you, you're drinking too much. And I said, did you become ashamed of who you were? Because I did. And then you met this lady. And I want to say the typical Hollywood ending. All of a sudden, the clouds part, and life is wonderful. I know it wasn't like that, but she's a big part of helping you get to where you're at today.
Yes. She was everything. She helped me get back on track. She helped me see the good in the world, despite the fact that I was surrounded by the darkness. And, as far as my job was concerned, I was still dealing with the murderers, and then it evolved into the political corruption in the city, which ultimately caused the sheriff's department to take over the Compton Police Department after it was disbanded. I was at the center of that investigation, which was about corruption in our narcotics unit. That story is long and complicated, but I did talk about it extensively in the book. And right now I don't think I could explain it well enough.
We'd have to have you back to talk about it. All I can say is this. I've been retired a long time. I got hurt and retired young. And to this day, whenever I hear reports of corruption in police work, it doesn't matter where it is in the United States, and it doesn't matter how long ago it was, part of me gets really, really angry.
Yes. And, that's one of the things I'm most proud of in this book, because, I talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And I would always read, cop books, and they were always like hero stories. It's kind of like every book I read, I was the most decorated officer in the history of my department. I made the most arrests. Just Clint Eastwood kind of books, And I'm thinking to myself, well, I did this job for a long time, and I don't know anyone like that. You know what I mean? I don't know anyone that just had a sparkling career and everything was just great for them. It's like, there's bad and there's ugly in every department, right? And I wanted to write about my department, and in order for me to write about the department and present it in a way to where the reader would believe it, I had to write. I had to describe. I had to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just in the department, but in myself too, right? Because we've all fallen short of who we're supposed to be.
Absolutely.
You understand what I'm saying? So I felt like in order for me to portray an accurate depiction of myself and my career, I had to give it all, and I gave it all, and it ruffled some feathers. But I talked about myself and my faults and failings just as much as I talked about others. You understand what I'm saying? So right now, to this day, I'm able to look in the mirror every day and not have any regrets about the job that I did and the things that I had to do to be successful in it.
And
because I never treated anyone bad. I never treated anyone bad. I I had to use force because I worked in an area where force was required
right.
a lot.
Same here.
Right? But I never killed anyone. And, you know, I never wanted to kill anyone. I would have if the situation would have presented itself and I had no other choice. Fortunately, I was not put into that position, right? And that's why I don't Monday morning quarterback officers that have had to use force, that have had to shoot people. I'm just thankful that I wasn't in the position that they were in at the time, if that makes sense.
I had so many close calls, and in a little over 10 years, I was in 4 shootings, and the first 2, I never even fired back. Immediately, I knew that the threat was over. The second 2 were long, drawn-out affairs. Everybody survived, thank goodness.
Right. Okay.
But you know what? It could easily gone another way. And there were so many close calls before where it didn't end in gunfire that it could have very easily. One of the questions I have for you is, you've obviously made a big transition. And you know what? The older I get, the more narrow the road becomes for my moral compass. Things that I felt I could get away with in my 20s and early 30s, I can't do now. I don't want to do. I hold myself to a very high standard. Are you the same way? Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, because part of my story also talks about growing up in Detroit. And, you know, I associated with gang members, and there was I went to juvenile hall. I was arrested a bunch of times. And ultimately, the reason that I came to be in California is because I was trying to escape Detroit, because I knew what my future held if I stayed there. So I joined the Marine Corps, right? I had just turned 18. I joined the Marine Corps. My first duty station, official duty station, was in California at Camp Pendleton. And on the weekends, we would go out to, you know, the nightclubs, and we happened to go out to a nightclub in Inglewood, and that's where I met my first wife, who just happened to be from Compton. So that's how I came to know of Compton. That's how I came to be a police officer in Compton. But I know I think I was always successful because I had been on both sides of the track. Right. And I realized that once I got on the side of the track that I chose to be my career, I wasn't going to straddle on that track. I was either going to be a good guy or I was either going to be a bad guy.
There's no middle of the road.
When I was growing up, man, you know, we looked at cops one way, right? It's kind of like, is he a dirty cop or is he a good cop? You know, most people don't think that criminals look at cops like that, but they do, right? They have more respect for the cops that do things the right way, because ultimately it's a game. They're out there trying to do things and get away with it, and cops are out there trying to catch them. You know what I mean? And those crooks, they have no respect for the cops that the color outside of the lines. And I didn't want to be one of those cops, because I knew how to do the job the right way without losing who I was, if that makes any sense.
It does. And for me, it was a lot of adjustments. I'll be honest with you. People say you knew what you signed up for. I thought I knew. I thought I knew how violent it was going to be. I really didn't know. I was not prepared. I have scars, both physical and mental and emotional. But you know what? It comes with the territory, and I'm proud of those scars. So you're not going to find me apologizing to anybody. But it was a transition to get to where I'm at today. And that's where I want to get to you. You really started changing your life. You really started saying, hey, I don't like the path I'm going down. I want to do things differently. You found a way to deal with the survivor's guilt, and then you decided to write this book. Was writing the book part of your therapy?
Oh, my God. It was like the keyboard Sigmund Freud. You know, a lot of parts I cried as I was writing it, you know. But the parts that I got most emotional about were the parts that dealt with my personal life. You know, where I came from, going through everything that I had to go through to get to where I am today. Yeah, there was a time when I was homeless. I slept in all-night movie theaters. I'd sneak in through the exit door, and you know, I slept in cars, anywhere. You know, because it was just a difficult time period for me. This was before I made the decision to become a police officer. You know, I was estranged from my family in Detroit. I didn't talk to them for a while, and it was because of emotional trauma that I went through as a child.
Gotcha.
Well, the woman that I met, Carolyn, you know, she helped me see through all that. You know, she helped me reconnect with my family. So it was a lot more than just me meeting this woman thinking, oh my God, she's hot, I want to date her. You know, it was so much deeper, and I had never experienced that before.
And I think that we'll have to read the book to get more insight into you, your progression, your journey to where you're at today. Frederick Reynolds, retired L.A. Sheriff's homicide detective, author of the book Black, White, and Gray All Over. I want to thank you so much for your service, and really thank you for spending time telling us the stories of the deaths of police officers Kevin Burrell and James MacDonald, your journey during and after, all very much appreciated. Where can people get more information about your book?
They can Amazon carries it, Barnes & Noble carries it.
Awesome. Fred, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated.
Oh, thank you for having me.
This was the podcast version of the nationally syndicated Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and we are so glad that you decided to join us. Big thanks to our guests for telling their story on the show. 2 simple things you can do. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com. That's letradio.com. And be sure to follow us or like us on Facebook. Do a search on Facebook for Law Enforcement Talk radio show, and be sure when you see a post that we put up that you like, that you resonate with, that gets your attention, be sure to share it with your friends. Back in just a few days, another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.